welcome to the American Shoulder and Elbow Surgeons podcast. I'm your host, Peter Chalmers, a shoulder and elbow surgeon at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. I'm joined today by my co-host, Brian Waterman, a sports and shoulder surgeon at Wake Forest. Brian, how are you doing?
Hey, Peter, good evening.
Good evening to you too. Before we get started, I should mention the views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the American Shoulder and Elbow Surgeons Society, University of Utah, Wake Forest University, or the institutions or companies of any of our guests. So today we're really excited to welcome Kristoff Goson to the podcast. Kristoff has worked at Zimmer-Biomet for many years, and he's guided product development across shoulder arthroplasty and more recently in biologics. We're very excited for him to share his experience working from the industry side. Kristoff, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you both for having me this evening. It's a privilege to get the opportunity to speak with you and all of your constituents.
So tell me, what is your background, Kristoff? Like, where did you come from originally?
Yeah, so I guess we'll go back just a little ways. So my mother was an immigrant from Eastern Europe, now right at the border of Greece and in North Macedonia. Father was second generation from parents from Italy and from Lebanon. You know, grew up in a real humble middle class in Akron, Ohio. Siblings, older and younger, and really was just raised, high integrity, hard work, and just do good. And through that process, grew up in Ohio. Met my wife after my undergrad, and we have two amazing teenage daughters now, and relocated down to Charlotte, North Carolina.
So what initially draw you to the field of orthopedics? I know you come from Ohio, and what's the entry into the field of orthopedics and implants specifically?
It actually started really young. I was always interested in just health and wellness. I actually ended up having a injury when I was a young teen in my wrist and had a ganglion removed surgically, and that was kind of my opening and to orthopedics with a physician there in Akron. Went through my undergrad, graduated with a sports med athletic training background, got to meet actually a PGY2 orthopedist by the name of Amy Tucker. Dr. Tucker, I owe you a call. She's a practicing foot and ankle surgeon, and got to meet her just through friends and asked her, what kind of professional network do you deal with in the operating room? I've always been interested in orthopedics, and she's the one that first enlightened me to the field of orthopedic med device. And through that contact, she introduced me to what was now what was then the lead Zimmer rep for Northeast Ohio. And after a bunch of interviews, Howard Berkowitz and Jim Venti both hired me to join their team as an entry-level sales rep in the field.
You started as a rep. I love that. So you were in the operating room at first as kind of a local rep for Zimmer?
Yeah, if I was lucky, I was in the operating room. But the reality is I even started, I would say, even a little bit more junior than that, from transporting instruments and inventory, setting up SPDs all over Northeast Ohio. I drove over 50,000 miles my first year and probably spent more on gas than I got paid, but I learned a lot, and that was what I was really grateful for. So yeah, I was in the operating room, learned the procedures, cut my teeth. In fact, one of the first operations I was ever in was a shoulder arthroplasty, and it was in Cleveland at Lutheran Hospital. Dr. Bill Seitz, who I'm sure you guys know, he taught me so much as an early rep. This is 23 years ago. So I really cut my teeth in orthopedics from that lens and from that perspective a long time ago.
We've never had a rep on the podcast before, and I feel like that's a big oversight. Tell us, before we move on to Zimmer, because I have a bunch of questions to ask you, but just tell us a little bit, like, what are the inner workings of the rep? What are the things that surgeons don't know that you guys are doing behind the scenes?
Wow, I don't know if I could spill all of that for you guys, but I will tell you what happens is I would call it the duck on the pond. Everything looks like things are pretty calm on the surface, but boy, oh boy, those paddles are moving really fast underneath the water. And the fast part is the logistics, of transportation, shipping things in and out, overnight deliveries, implants that you're hoping to pull from XYZ, FedEx issues that are outside of your control, and just more operational, logistical kind of stuff that you want to make sure that absolutely everything is perfect. The surgeon, his staff, the patient, they get everything that they need. And I think from my experience being on that side and working my way through really the entire commercial organization, I'm now in like my 8th role within this group in this company. I've learned a lot from every stage, and that chapter really helped set the stage for me of how do we make sure that our commercial organization, gets what they need, both from innovation, both from supply chain, medical training, education, and all the things that I'm responsible for today.
Yeah, so fast forward, you're currently, according to LinkedIn, Global Vice President, General Manager, Extremities, Sports Medicine, and Restorative Therapies. Certainly a mouthful, but walk us through what's that pathway look like to start where you were 23 years ago, now to your current role within Zimmer?
Well, it was one of those things. We started where I began, humble beginnings, and I still feel the same today. Still continue to learn a lot, guys. So it is a mouthful of a title, but I'm just a part of the team. I started as a rep, and once you do good as a rep and prove yourself both to your team, to your customers, and they grow confidence in you, then all of a sudden you get this magic wand. Well, if you're a good sales rep, then you should be a manager, right? With no management, training officially, and it just happens kind of organically like that. And so I've been privileged to demonstrate that I can perform with the duties at hand and the responsibilities. So started then as a sales team leader, built a team, continued to tackle new challenges. And at the time, interesting little story, I was having the full line of Zimmer. So I had hip, knee, trauma, shoulder arthroplasty. We didn't have a sports medicine line. We didn't have any real technology like we have today. And we had just lost the contract for procurement at the Cleveland Clinic for hip and knee arthroplasty for 5 years. And I wasn't even a part of that territory. And my boss at the time, my manager, said, "Hey, I think you're the right guy to go up there and really grow our presence at the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospital's case." And I decided, I was just freshly married, asked my wife, "Hey, do you want to move up to Cleveland? We'll set some roots up here and really be a part of that community and try to turn something from being out of contract for 5 years into something special." And I got to tell you, at every point in my career, there's been proud moments. And today, the Cleveland Clinic is one of our largest IDN customers across multi-specialty orthopedics. We have a great partnership that's still from over 15 years ago, and I owe it a lot to the relationships of the surgeons and my team that I built. And through that process, then asked to become sales VP for Northeast Ohio, and then sent myself back to grad school because Zimmer buys Biomet, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. And I saw things completely change in my world, and I said, "Boy, I got to learn more about business." So I went back to B school, had 2 kids, full-time job, and got my executive MBA, and then was asked to take on another challenge, and that's what moved my family. Ultimately, I became a distributor of South Carolina, then half of North Carolina and South Carolina, merged those agencies together, and then about 5 years ago, my now CEO was COO, Yvonne Tornos, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we've got an underperforming global business. What do you think about taking that on and seeing what you can do?" And I appreciate, his sponsorship of me and seeing something in me through my track record of, tackling challenges and kind of running towards the storm. And that's where I see myself today, is really what inspires me, is solving problems and understanding what the needs are and how can I rally the team, both from a strategy perspective, but ultimately an execution. And so 5 years ago, I took over one business, the upper extremities franchise. About 9 months later, we were doing really good things. Sports medicine was offered to me. And then 3 months ago, the restorative therapies business, which is kind of cell-based therapies, disease-modifying injectables, kind of this restore idea, right? Some office-based technologies. So proud to lead a large cross-functional team globally that's really leaning in and solving real problems, that we can help be good partners to you and to your audience, specifically in how you treat your patients across, these three platforms.
It sounds like you've, at this point, moved fully to the corporate side from, kind of the rep to the distributor, rep to the manager to the distributor to the corporate side. Tell us a little bit about the corporate side. Like, where did Zimmer start? Do you have like a brief origin story on Zimmer?
Yeah, I sure do. We have a rich history, as you guys probably know, and many of your listeners. So Justin Zimmer was our founder, and we're approaching 98 years. 98 years, but the way that we act is like a startup. I will tell you the innovation in the bold strategy that we're executing upon at our senior leadership level is really second to none than I've seen in my 23 years. But Justin Zimmer started off actually at DePuy in Warsaw, Indiana. In 1927, he wasn't happy with an idea that he brought to DePuy, which was around a new novel splint, an aluminum splint. So he went down the road and started his own shop. And there was, think back to the 20s, there was railroads kind of passing through. Transportation was there. It was a real small town, but it was comfortable. And then 98 years ago, through numerous acquisitions and spinoffs from Bristol-Myers Squibb and many other things, 2014, Zimmer announces the acquisition of Biomet for just over $13 billion. And right before it closed in 2015, we actually lost Dane Miller, the founder of Biomet. And then actually just about 6 weeks ago, his wife, Mary Louise. So unfortunately, the Millers are no longer physically with us, but the legacy that they will leave from the Biomet side of our organization continues to weave its way through the threads of the fabric of who we are today. And then ultimately, post the acquisition of Biomet and that merger, we've been continuing to be active in acquisitions inorganically. So we've acquired, probably 15 other companies since 2015 to really build out our strategy, which I can talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been personally involved in later if you'd like.
Yeah, Kristoff, I think this is incredible because as we talk about mergers, and that's inevitability in industry now, we always hear about the upsides, but when you talk about this, what are the challenges you faced and what are the advantages you potentially gained in this process?
Wow. Well, I will tell you, the learning comes from the challenges, oftentimes more than the benefits. And
Well
I
stated.
wasn't in the role. I wasn't in the role that I am in today, right? So I will tell you this. My commentary is from all the learnings that I did have, and then ultimately that I've absorbed now in my current role. But maybe it would help if I just start with a couple of goals of such a large acquisition, and then I'll tell you what clearly didn't go as planned. But you think about the value of bringing a Zimmer and a Biomet together. Portfolio breadth was a very strategic decision. How can we solve more problems, have more options for surgeons to take care of their patients within our key businesses? We gain some globalization through this process and how we can be deeper and broader across the world in certain key countries. And then you think about just the tactics about how do we leverage that portfolio in those different markets, whether you get on contract or in tenders outside the U.S., having a rich portfolio and checking all the boxes that you can solve compared to the incumbents is very important. And then you think about through this process, not only portfolio, but can you gain some efficiencies, right? Efficiencies come in lots of different, structures, but ultimately supply chain leverage, right? To decrease costs based on scale and buying raw materials through production and manufacturing sites. So you can synergize all of that. So you can try to ultimately obtain, higher profitability and larger scale in how we support our surgeons. So maybe before I go on to the challenges and pivot there, any questions on like the goals of it before I do?
No, that's high yield material actually right there. I think that summarizes it nicely.
Okay, so now on to the juicy question, like what didn't we see? I guess, right, that see coming,
I'm leaning into
and I
my
talked.
microphone right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, Brian, like you think about what I just said on the positive portfolio breadth. At the same time, I got to tell you, like too many options is a problem. And it took us a long time, and I'll give you a data point that we made publicly available. Uh, when Zimmer bought Biomet in 2015, we spent nearly $1 billion remediating what we call design history files to maintain products in the market, because many of your listeners may not quite appreciate that the FDA and other international agencies that register products don't necessarily have the exact same standards for every company. And so we know this because Zimmer had a certain standard and Biomet had a different standard. And we ultimately had to remediate design files just to maintain products in the market. And because of the breadth, the length of time that it took, multiple years and nearly $1 billion, that was a much higher remediation cost that ultimately paused innovation more than we ever expected. So I will tell you that was probably the biggest challenge that we faced. Clearly, there were some cultural, mismatches that happened in large organizations. We had to make a couple of divestitures. Actually, one of the elbow products that you guys probably know, we had to divest from the Biomet side, some cement products, a partial knee, and then ultimately the rest of the portfolio we maintained. But those are, I think, some of the keys that led to where we are today, and ultimately got me excited about the pivot from remediation to innovation. And that's really the last 5 years has been, when I came on board in this role, that main inflection point.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the. It's so interesting you put it that way, because the remediation, I think, is something that really did affect the pace of innovation, because it was so complicated to do and obviously so expensive and so time consuming. But there's also a challenge with mergers, like if there's existing systems. Like for instance, like if you have two existing shoulder arthroplasty systems, how do you make them all work together? Like what does that look like when you looked at the comprehensive system coming from Biomet and the CM system coming from Zimmer? Like there's emotional ties and sales track records and design features, and like how do you, like some things you make, well, this is what is legacy, what is the future? Like how do you figure that out strategically?
Oh man, that's a complex question, and I think the good news is, and I didn't have to be the person in my role today, and I give them a lot of credit, the teams that were involved in making those initial decisions. But I will tell you, I've had to pick up those decisions and continue and change course in some regards in order to take a very broad portfolio and ultimately harmonize it to something that is more palatable across the globe. And so, we have six, I'll talk shoulder arthroplasty real quick, six different glenoid systems today. We had three different stemless systems, and I just launched a fourth with my team. We have so many different options available, and while that's good, it ultimately creates some dyssynergy when you think about go-to-market strategies, when you think about your brand recognition in the marketplace, when you think about how do you keep registrations in key markets and the costs associated from a supply chain perspective. Ultimately, less brands that solve the right problems is the better choice if you can from a business perspective. But that's very hard to do because of all of the reasons that you said. And so it's thoughtful but decisive. And what I've learned over the course of time is, I won't make everybody happy, but I will treat everybody fairly. And fairly means understand obligations, commitments, requirements, embrace the history, and have that history be the lineage to solving problems with newer designs and innovations moving forward. And so those are just some ideas of how things came to be. And I'm happy to dig in any more specifics around any of the portfolio if you'd like.
Can I ask, follow up on one thing you said there? You said that Biomet had to divest itself from, I think that was from the Discovery total elbow, right?
That's right.
And then obviously on the elbow side, Zimmer has long been a leader with the Kunrad Mori and now with the Nexel. And this is really a lot of interest to our field, but it's a real underrepresented part of the market. It seems like there's this kind of tension between comprehensive portfolio, but also the fact that these are not that commonly used products. So I know that can be challenging to justify on the business side from a regulatory perspective. Like, why did you have to divest from Discovery, and what can you tell us about elbow arthroplasty from the industry side?
Yeah, sure. So basically, the high level on divestitures through an acquisition is based on market share, and different countries have a different threshold to where if you combine, then there's more of a monopolization of business, and that leverage that a company or an industry can have is seen as unfavorable. And so specifically in the elbow, when you think about Kunrad Mori, Nexel, so Kunrad Mori has 40-year clinical track record. Nexel was designed by Zimmer to be kind of next gen, if you will. We went from trying to have patients feed themselves with rheumatoid arthritis and some basic personal hygiene to, now younger and younger patients with higher expectations, post-traumatic, et cetera. And so we added vitamin E and beefed up the bearing. And so between those two systems, and then you add Discovery, at the time in market share, we would have had over 70% market share of all total elbows at Zimmer-Biomet. And so there was a couple of main countries in the EU and then ultimately in the US that with the SEC that we had to divest. So that was the cause of it. And then, yes, there has been tension even between the two, systems on our end. And it's very interesting that even with the lineage that we have and the storied, track record that we have with Kunrad Mori and even Nexel in most hands, the balance, and I'm happy to share with you, our split of procedures with those two systems globally is about 50-50. And it has stayed 50-50 for the past, I'd say, over 5 to almost 10 years. Not very markedly changes. There's subtle changes between the two in terms of users, but not really a lot since.
Yeah, I mean, it really is incredible to follow the longitudinal history of your company. And I think that no conversation is complete without an important step back in time and look at the history of the Biglione Flato system that was designed at Columbia. And really, Peter said it's the spiritual ancestor of Near's original designs. I love that. So tell us about that. I mean, I kind of long for the days of simplicity, but at the same point in time, we've evolved significantly. So maybe if you could just give us a touch point on the history of your system.
Wow. Well, first time I've heard that, Dr. Chalmers, the spiritual ancestor of Dr. Near. I love that. And I will tell you, the credit to some of my commentary is actually going to go to our friends at Columbia in the article that they published in the journal, From Near to Now. It was pretty amazing. Drs. Levine, Biglione, Jobin, Knudsen, and many others that were a part of that. And in that article, there's a beautiful track record from the early first cases with the man that, what was the story? He's in his late 30s that refused an amputation in Paris and has one of the first documented shoulders, to then all the incredible work that Dr. Near did in hemi and anatomic, thinking through constraint and metallurgy with Vitalium implants, and how do we think about cuff deficiency. I will tell you the things that Dr. Near was able to add in design of shoulders, they don't just permeate through Zimmer-Biomet systems, they permeate through the industry as we know it today. And the work that was done at Columbia with Doctors Biliani and Flato and that system, and adding trabecular metal, which came through an acquisition of Implex back in '03. When I actually started, that was the year that we closed on Implex. And just quick little history side adjunct on TM. Most of you know of TM, but at the time, it was actually called Hydrocell Biomaterial. And then we changed the name to trabecular metal, which truly was the first third generation ultra porous material that really shaped all the ultra porous materials that exist today in orthopedics. And so through all of that lineage in the Columbia work, we've changed and integrated from, BF and TM. Gosh, I got another little side story for you about TM Reverse. So our current ASES president, Dr. Miniaci. So fun fact, Dr. Miniaci was the first implanter of the TM Reverse shoulder in Cleveland, Ohio. And guess who was his sales rep manager in the world's first case? So I have I was in that case. I remember it like it was yesterday. He and I still have fun about the days of the lineage of that system and how that came through with all the things that we're able to do with platform technologies and reverse, et cetera. Then you've got the other side of the house with Biomet coming through with comprehensive. And, Dr. Chalmers, you asked this earlier, like, how do we think about bringing these things together in the teams and the innovation and the design? And I will tell you, that's on me now in that my team to work through that. And what we've done is we really launched next generation systems, and I'm really, really proud of our team. And this is not a commercial, but in the past 17 months, my team and I launched 17 new shoulder products from continuum of care, from early intervention, soft tissue, biology, regenerative medicine to arthroplasty. We launched a brand new stemless shoulder early this year called OsteoFit, which merges the best of Cetus, the best of Nano, the best of Test that was in Europe as a reverse for over 20 years, and other aspects that don't exist today. We just launched Identity as a new platform, humeral stemmed arthroplasty technology, merging the best of what we had, the legacy of Z and B plus, and I just launched the second generation of Identity last month, and the final stage, or the next stage, is just a few months away. So we have really this idea of taking the lineage, having the clinical history, power and fuel the innovation and the spirit behind it, and then ultimately deliver a best-in-class global solution. And that's what we're proud of doing today.
So I want to ask about Identity. And you went through just a beautiful delineation of history. Before we move on, though, Implex, do I have this correct, that it was actually a company that made dental coatings or made dental implants?
Yeah, they did have dental. Correct.
And that was like where the first porous ingrowth came from, like I guess was actually from dentistry, and then it was like, oh, we could scale this up and put this in bigger bones.
That's exactly right. I think we get a lot from dentistry, and even things like, patient-specific instruments and 3D pre-op planning that, we all talk about planification today. Well, our friends in dentistry have been doing it for much, much longer than we have. So yeah, it's interesting. To your point, a lot has come from that space.
You mentioned the trabecular metal anatomic and reverse implants. When I placed a lot of those in fellowships, I know they're still regularly placed worldwide. And I know the company is moving towards Identity. What do you think are the lessons learned in Identity? Like, what are the things, when you look at Identity, what are the things where you think this is something we got right that was an improvement over prior systems?
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot on both sides. Quite frankly, on things that we learn that we like a lot, that we've been integrated within Identity. one of the things that was a challenge with Identity was it started with Zimmer, and then during the merge, things, as I mentioned earlier, slowed down. And so investment slowed down to continue to build it out. So this system, was actually a very long design process. And so one of the things that went really well that we wanted to do is create this, a personalized approach that truly is convertible and revisable. Every system says it is, but this one actually uniquely sits in this prep 5 millimeters below the resection level. So if and when you need to revise a well-fixed stem from an anatomic to a reverse, you can actually keep it and decompress the joint, which is often tight, as you guys know, and put a reverse in and keep a well-fixed stem. So surgeons really like that. I will say that feature. And they also really like surgeons like you, like specialists, seem to like to titrate a lot more than, your generalist surgeon predominantly. And when I say titrate, this is also the only system right now in a reverse that you can actually purely lateralize on your trays and not distalize while you add tension. And so being able to uniquely titrate the humeral side and the glenoid side without distalization, and we know some of the inherent risks around acromial stress fractures and, design, and not only design, but technique related implications associated. Those are the things that I think that have been very, very positive. Conversely, I'll just be very candid. Even with Identity, maybe it's because it started so long ago in design. When we launched it, we only had one neck shaft angle, and clearly there's another camp and philosophy around a more varus neck shaft with the system. And it wasn't until my team and I, went back and said, boy, what are we missing here? What's the market that's growing? And it's really this kind of inlay 135, enthusiast philosophy. And so we did launch about 2 years ago our 135 neck shaft angle on there. And then in the next few months, we've got our next iteration of that, which is even more inlay 135, more tray options, and really keeping the inherent benefits, but giving even a little bit more titration capabilities. So really proud of how Identity has been performing and surgeon, feedback on it. And it's really hard, to have a system that's in the heels of, what we just got an award actually in the Australian registry, right? One of the largest unbiased registries in the world that has, 15 different reverse systems that have been used. 1 month ago, we were very proud to receive the first ever superiority award from the Australian registry on comprehensive reverse. At 10 years, the least revised, most successful reverse shoulder ever studied. And so, when you have something like that, a giant in clinical evidence, and that type of data, to really bring something to market that actually builds off of that in a positive way, is something that we do believe in the first 3 years now with Identity that we have accomplished, but clearly time will tell.
I love this discussion. We've gone from the past to the present to the past, and now we're talking about current innovations. I'm curious if I can put you on the spot. If you were in charge of the FDA and approvals and further iterations in technology, what would you do to facilitate or increase the pace of innovation and expedite bringing new products to market? Particularly if I can bring in the space of biologics too, if you want to dovetail there.
Yeah, sure. And maybe it would be just a quick background on regulatory bodies. Originally, or when I say originally, over the past 20 years, it's been predominantly known that you would start in Europe, launch a product, get some clinical experience, and then bring it to the US, right? That's how it typically worked by most companies. And that has really changed. And it hasn't changed because the FDA has gotten more lax. In fact, it's the opposite. It's even more rigorous than it ever was before. But what really changed is actually the European market standards. So the European governing body, FDA-like body, was called MDD, and now it changed to what's called MDR. And that process has actually made it even more stifling to bring innovation to market than the US FDA. So I guess that's my plug to the FDA to say thank you for being somewhat reasonable, because the incremental challenges and rigor that has progressed over the years has not been as much as what we've seen in Europe. And so now we need over 2 years of clinical data to be able to even start the process of bringing a product to Europe that hasn't been there before. And so now we're actually starting innovation, Dr. Waterman, in the US. So that wasn't necessarily your question, but I guess I just want to answer it in some context about like how your European partners are feeling, even a little bit more challenged than, or quite a bit more challenged rather than what we are seeing here in the US. But I guess back to your question, what would my recommendations be? I mean, I know what's at stake. I mean, our team and my peers' teams across the industry, we really care. Like, we really, really care to make sure that the products that we launch are safe and effective for patients, like full stop. And it's really difficult to want to come up with ideas of how to, you know, trim time and bring innovation forward, because we have seen products in the market, even as of recently in the US, that have gone through rigorous processes and hasn't worked out well. And, you know, you would think, right, that through the testing, benchtop testing, and through the process and clinical data, that some of these things would come to light sooner, and they just don't. And so I'm torn, right, because I love innovation and I drive the innovation strategy within our company. But at the same time, we got to be very thoughtful around the timing and the approach. So all that to say, it is harder. It's more costly to do it than it ever was before. We need more patience than we ever did before. But I think it's all for the right inherent reasons.
That's really well stated, and I love your commitment to innovation. You know, one of the things that I think is great about industry is you guys have a much more wide-looking perspective. You'll say, okay, what are all of the things that are happening throughout all of medicine? How can we take pieces from that and bring them to shoulder? What are when you think about it that way, like, what are the innovations you're most excited about? You know, and like maybe 3D printing was recent, but like and people talk about, you know, augmented reality. Like, what are the things you look at that are kind of on the horizon that you're excited for us to incorporate into shoulder surgery?
Yeah, there's a lot of them, and I will tell you, there's some I can disclose and some I'm not quite prepared to, but would love to talk with you more another time. But with that said, you named a couple of them, and there's more. So for us, and for me in shoulder specifically, we have chips on the table in several different verticals. And I will say, go back to the 3 places from an innovation perspective that we're indexing investment. 1 is implant innovation, 2 is enabling technologies, and 3 is data and informatics. And so when we think about the ecosystem around the patient and the ecosystem around the surgeon, we're really talking about bringing things to shoulder that didn't exist before, right? From best-in-class novel remote therapeutic monitoring technologies to help with optimization and efficiency capabilities preoperatively, which ultimately can power pre-op planification better today with modalities and features in predictive analytics to help decision-making processes that don't fully exist today, to then taking that and say, okay, well, I have all this great data. How do I make this meaningful in the operating room? And so enter, you know, our tremendous investment in robotics, right? From our ROSA platform that's now, you know, 7 years. We have over 2,000 ROSA robots that started from a brain robot, and a lot of people don't actually know that. We actually acquired this company from Montpellier, France, that we had a relationship with for over 20 years, that actually was able to drill through the cranium and help place electrodes to help stop seizures in patients that had epilepsy. And if we can drill through the brain and we can place seizures or really truly treat seizures and epilepsy, truly becoming a gold standard, over 70% of the world's level 1 epilepsy centers have a ROSA brain. And if we can do that, then we can do a shoulder arthroplasty. And so how can we take that planification and do best in class robotics with submillimetric accuracy? And then what we love about ROSA and now our acquisition of Monogram, so we bought another robotics platform and we're merging the best in class features together as we speak. So ROSA shoulder captures over 1,000 intraoperative data points. So it's not what you plan to do, but it's what you did accomplish. And then with one click of a button, and I know you guys and many of your listeners are into research, and not everybody has a research assistant and a ton of funding for that. But we can, with one click of a button, surgeons can say, how well are my ROSA shoulder patients doing on their PROMs versus my standard instrument shoulders? In 1 second, you can get all your PROMs and see on your remote therapeutic monitoring tool post-operatively. So we are really excited to bring to life a frictionless, integrated ecosystem of data. And ultimately, that feedback loop is going to help us innovate in the future. And so those are just a few of those key things. Yes, we're into mixed reality, and it's coming to a theater near you soon in shoulder from Zimmer-Biomet. Yes, we're into predictive analytics, 3D printing, you've heard, and all these other things. But I will tell you, on the arthroplasty side, those are the things that get me really excited about, that are unique, that Zimmer-Biomet's offering. And then on the soft tissue side, I think it's really clear. We're moving from, being mechanics, right, to biologists. And some of our friends, Scott Sigman and others, talk about that. And we're actioning that and how we can bring biology to soft tissue, because 30%, 20 to 40%, whatever numbers, we want to quote of patients that have some sort of complication after a cuff and other soft tissue procedures. We can do better, and we will. And so we're here to partner with key thought leaders, scientific thought leaders, innovators. And again, not just with what we have capabilities of doing, but one of the things I get to do is help work with our team to identify external capabilities on how we can accelerate innovation and bring those capabilities to life within our portfolio into the future. So there's still a lot more that needs to be solved. So I'm really excited and inspired for those future innovations.
Well, Kristoff, I think it's safe to say we've covered a lot of ground. We came from the mean streets of Akron to Rosa and biologics. So, I mean, just an incredible foundation of knowledge, and it's evident that your company has the right people making these decisions. So, just a testament to you to be able to talk about this stuff so much off the cuff. That's about all the time we have this evening, but I just want to thank you, Kristoff, for spending time with us and offering your insights into the industry side of our field. I think this has been a great experiment for us to get inside of the mind of our colleagues. We certainly are always better together. So, for all our shoulder and elbow listeners out there, please don't forget to subscribe. And for Peter Chalmers, I'm Brian Waterman. We'll see you next time. Thank you.